At exactly midnight on November 15th, 2024, in a secluded corner of Pinewood, a small town in Georgia, USA, while the entire town was deep in slumber, the police officers received an urgent call. According to the report, a group of suspicious-looking individuals had gathered at an old house on the outskirts of town, a place long known as a hideout for fugitives. The police cars immediately sped toward the provided address, a dilapidated house standing alone amidst a dense pine forest. The headlights illuminated the entire area, cutting through the stillness of the night. Sirens blared, shattering Pinewood's usual tranquility. As soon as the car doors swung open, the officers quickly deployed, ready for an unpredictable confrontation. Their objective: to apprehend Billy, a wanted criminal who had been on the run for months. But none of them knew that tonight would turn into one of the most bizarre chases they had ever witnessed. Stepping out of the cars, the officers swiftly spread out, guns at the ready, flashlights sweeping across the area, illuminating the front yard that was otherwise swallowed by darkness. Wasting no time, they stormed into the yard, the sound of their boots thudding against the dry ground, echoing loudly in the dead of night. The tension in the air was palpable, as if even the smallest sound could trigger a full-blown pursuit. A tall, rugged officer leading the group shouted, "Where's Billy? We know he's here!" Suddenly, the front door of the house creaked open with an eerie sound. Stepping out from the shadows was the homeowner, a young woman with disheveled hair and a look of panic in her eyes. She was dressed in an old hoodie and ripped jeans, looking as though she had just been dragged out of bed. Her face was as pale as a sheet, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. "Billy? I don't know what you're talking about. I just came here to grab my things." Her words came out weak and full of fear. She even raised her hands, as if to prove her innocence. The officers exchanged suspicious glances with one another. One of them, Officer Rodriguez, known for his keen instinct for detecting lies, raised an eyebrow, smirking slightly. "You think we're fools? This isn't the first time we've heard excuses like that." Without wasting another second, the officers began to fan out, searching the area. Flashlights scanned every corner, from the overgrown grass at the edge of the yard to the cluttered old cars parked out back. They turned over trash cans, even checked the flower pots nearby, as if Billy could somehow shrink himself and hide in such a tiny space. The homeowner took a step back, her voice growing sharper as she tried to mask the anxiety welling up in every cell of her body. "You have no right to search this place. This is private property, and I know the law. Without a warrant, you can't just barge in." But her protests were quickly cut short. Officer Jenkins, known for his tough demeanor, pointed a finger straight at her face. "Don't start lecturing us about the law, miss. You think we need a warrant to catch a fugitive? We have a witness who saw Billy come in here tonight." The woman bit her lip, trying to stay calm, but her hands were visibly shaking. The officers continued their search, one by one entering the house. They pushed open every door, checked every room, but found no one except a lazy cat napping on the sofa. Just then, a strange noise came from the direction of the backyard shed. The officers immediately drew their guns and rushed toward the sound. The woman screamed, trying to run after them, but one officer held her back. "Stay right there! Don't make this worse!" At the shed, the officers signaled to each other before forcefully pushing the door open. Inside was a chaotic mess of old items, but no sign of anyone. However, Officer Rodriguez noticed something odd. The dust on the floor had footprints, as if someone had recently walked through. He signaled for the K9 unit to enter, and the dog immediately began barking loudly, running around in circles frantically. Meanwhile, the homeowner kept shouting, "This is my house, you have no right." But her screams were drowned out by the dog's frenzied barking, and the officers shouted commands. They discovered a small hidden door leading to a basement, just big enough for a person to crawl through. As they forced it open, a musty odor wafted out, accompanied by a rustling sound like something trying to escape. "You won't find anything?" the woman cried, but there was a hint of tremor in her voice, as if she herself wasn't sure what secrets might be hidden. Sensing the shift in her tone, Officer Jenkins sneered, "Oh, we'll see about that, won't we?" The officers quickly descended into the basement, where they didn't find Billy but someone else, a young man who looked just as terrified, his hands and feet bound as if he'd been held captive for some time. But in the chaotic moment, another figure suddenly bolted from a back door, sprinting into the woods. Once again, The chase resumed, this time with a new target. The woman unexpectedly burst into laughter, as if she had just witnessed some bizarre scene that only she understood. The officers, unaware that this night was far from over, braced themselves for yet another pursuit. The young woman stood there under the harsh glare of the flashlights, looking like an actress in a late-night drama. Her eyes sparkled as if on the verge of tears, her lips quivering. "I swear to you, I just came to collect my belongings. I don't know any Billy." But the melodramatic tone in her voice was too theatrical, making the officers narrow their eyes in suspicion. They had heard too many lies in their careers. One officer stepped forward, his voice stern. "Listen, if you're lying, we will search this entire house." The threat caused the air to freeze. She shot a quick glance toward the living room door. The officers caught that look, their suspicions deepening. "We need to check inside," one officer said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "No, you can't go in without a warrant," the woman protested frantically. "Fine, we'll wait for a warrant, but no one is leaving," the officer commanded, blocking all exits. The woman anxiously rummaged through her pockets, pulling out her phone, but it was swiftly snatched away. "No calls to anyone," another officer snapped. As time ticked by, the woman began pleading, "Please, I'm just here for my things." "We know exactly what you're trying to hide," an officer scoffed, turning to his team. "Rodriguez, check around." Footsteps echoed as they searched every corner. The woman tried to maintain her composure, but sweat was now trickling down her forehead. Suddenly, an unusual sound came from behind the sofa. An officer moved closer, pulling the sofa away to reveal a dislodged carpet covering a hidden trapdoor. Well, what do we have here?" The officer smirked. "You said you were just here for your things, but forgot to mention this secret hatch." The woman froze, her eyes widening in horror. Another officer yanked the hatch open, shining a flashlight down. They discovered a staircase leading to a basement, and immediately the officers rushed down, their footsteps echoing in the cramped space. Under the harsh light, they saw stacks of wooden crates, but no one was there. Suddenly, a figure sprang out from behind the crates, darting toward the basement exit. The officers gave chase, but the person managed to slip through a small escape route outside. "That's Billy! It has to be him!" one officer shouted, though the commander wasn't entirely convinced. "All units, deploy a search around the area," the commander ordered. The officers spread out. The sound of dogs barking echoed as the K-9 units were released. Amidst the chaos, the woman was handcuffed and taken to the car, still yelling, "You've got the wrong person! I'm innocent!" The officers spread out. The sound of dogs barking echoed as the K-9 units were released. Amidst the chaos, the woman was handcuffed and taken to the car, still yelling, "You've got the wrong person! I'm innocent!" The woman shook her head, her voice tense. "Seth? I don't know anyone named Seth." An older officer stepped forward, pulling out a piece of paper from his pocket. "We received a tip that Seth was seen here." The woman hesitated but quickly protested. "You've got it wrong. Someone must be playing a prank." "We've had reports of suspicious activities here for weeks," the older officer said. "Several neighbors spotted Seth coming and going from this house." "You're lying." The girl began to lose control, her voice turning shrill with desperation. "You have no evidence. You can't break in here without a warrant." But she had made a grave mistake. Her panic at the mention of Seth only confirmed to the police that they were on the right track. The officer signaled to his team, "All right, if you refuse to cooperate, we'll search the entire premises. Maybe Seth doesn't want to meet us, but trust me, we have ways to make him come out." The officers quickly split up, combing through each room. The sounds of doors slamming open and heavy footsteps echoed throughout the house. The girl tried to stop them, but there was nothing she could do except watch with a pale face. When one team entered the master bedroom, they stumbled upon a strange sight. Thick curtains drawn tightly, hiding part of the room. The lead officer swiftly drew his gun, approaching cautiously and commanding, "Come out now!" "Hands up! No resistance!" There was no response. The air grew suffocating with tension. The officers began a countdown. 3, 2, 1, and yanked the curtain open. Behind the curtain was just an old wardrobe. But something felt off. There was a faint shuffling noise from inside, as if someone was trying to hold their breath. They flung the wardrobe doors open, and just as they suspected, a disheveled man lunged out. But it wasn't Seth. It was someone else, not on their wanted list. "Who are you?" the officer demanded harshly. the man panted. "I'm just a friend of Seth." "I don't know anything. He told me to hide here." The woman in the living room, now completely losing her composure, screamed, "No, I don't know anything about him. I told you already." The commanding officer turned to look at her, eyes glinting with disdain. "So, how do you explain a stranger hiding in your house? And all the tips about Seth? We will get to the bottom of this." The girl was cornered, her face drained of color as if she had seen a ghost. The police continued their sweep through the rest of the house, and once again, they heard noises from the basement. This time, they were better prepared. Descending into the dark basement, they found Seth, the man they had been hunting, desperately trying to pry open a hidden exit behind a crumbling brick wall. He raised his hands in surrender when he saw guns pointed at him from all directions. With Seth captured, the girl collapsed to the floor, realizing that all her lies had crumbled. The police had not only found their fugitive, but had also uncovered a complex network of criminals hiding in what seemed like an innocent suburban home. And so, the quiet house in the sleepy neighborhood became the epicenter of a large-scale raid, leaving behind a story of a night filled with deception, fugitives, and secrets that could no longer remain hidden. Realizing she had nothing left to lose, the woman decided to play her final card, switching to a defiant, self-appointed lawyer mode. "Do you even have a search warrant?" "I have the right to see the warrant." The officers hesitated briefly, a few raising their eyebrows as if they had just heard a bad joke. They were all too familiar with this kind of legal bluff in past busts. A tall officer, presumably the commander, stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. "We have a digital warrant. By law, we don't need to show it to you immediately." She let out a mocking laugh, her voice cutting through the night like a challenge to the entire police force. "Digital warrant? In this tiny town, you expect me to believe that? Do you think I'm stupid enough to fall for that trick?" Her sarcastic remark immediately ramped up the tension. Some officers began to show signs of impatience, while others could only sigh in exhaustion. It had already been a long, stressful night, and now this woman was just making things more difficult. The commander turned to a younger officer and ordered, "Check the system immediately. If needed, show her the warrant on the tablet." The woman, sensing she was gaining the upper hand, grew even more confident. "Do you want me to call my lawyer? Or should we just stand here arguing until morning?" But she was mistaken. The young officer swiftly tapped on his tablet, then held it up in front of her. The screen glowed brightly, displaying the clear words, "Valid search warrant. Signed by Judge." Her face briefly faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. "Fine, but you're not going to find anything. I already told you. I don't know any Billy or Seth." The commander shrugged and signaled for the other officers to start the search. Realizing she was losing control, the woman became frantic, blocking every doorway, every room, desperately trying to stop them. "You have no right to touch my belongings. This is a violation of my privacy." Another officer, likely at the end of his patience, shouted, "Ma'am, if you continue to obstruct us, we'll have no choice but to cuff you for interfering with an officer." The girl had become hysterical, hurling insults at them, but ultimately retreated as the officers began to tear through every nook and cranny of the house. A team of officers entered the small kitchen, which appeared abandoned, but something seemed off. They noticed an old refrigerator pushed tightly against the wall. When one officer tried to open the door, it was stuck, as if something inside was blocking it. "Is anyone in there?" the officer shouted, banging on the fridge door. There was no response, but faint noises could be heard from within. They pried it open, ready for anything that might come next.
"You're lying!"
The woman began to lose control, her voice shrill with desperation.
"You have no proof! You can't just barge in here without a warrant!"
But she had made a critical mistake. Her panic at the mention of Seth only confirmed to the police that they were on the right track. The officer in charge signaled to his team, "All right, if you're not going to cooperate, we'll search the entire premises. Maybe Seth doesn't want to meet us, but trust me, we'll make sure he comes out." The officers quickly split up, searching each room. Doors were thrown open, heavy footsteps echoed through the house. The woman tried to stop them, but there was nothing she could do except watch in terror, her face going pale. When one group of officers entered the master bedroom, they found an odd sight. Thick curtains drawn tightly, concealing part of the room. The lead officer drew his gun and approached cautiously, shouting, "Come out now!" Hands up, no resistance. There was no response. The tension in the air was suffocating. The officers began a countdown. 3, 2, 1, and yanked the curtains open. Behind them was only an old wardrobe, but something was off. There was a faint rustling from inside, like someone trying to hold their breath. They flung the wardrobe doors open, and as they had expected, a disheveled man jumped out. But it wasn't Seth, nor Billy. It was someone else, a complete stranger.
Who are you?
Barked one of the officers. The man stammered, I'm just a friend of Billy. I don't know anything. He told me to hide here. Out in the living room, the woman could no longer keep her composure. She screamed, "No, I don't know him! I told you already!" The commanding officer turned to her with a look of disdain. Then explain why there's a stranger hiding in your house. And all those tips about Seth? We're going to get to the bottom of this. She was cornered, her face as white as a sheet, knowing all her lies were unraveling. The police pushed deeper into the house, and once more, they heard a noise from the basement. This time, they were ready. Descending into the dark basement, they found Seth, the man they had been hunting, desperately trying to open a secret escape door behind a crumbling brick wall. He surrendered the moment he saw guns pointed at him from every direction. With Seth in custody, the woman collapsed to the floor, knowing that all her deceit had come crashing down. The police hadn't just captured a fugitive. They had uncovered a tangled web of criminals hiding in what seemed to be a quiet, innocent home. The house, once peaceful in the middle of a suburban neighborhood, had become the scene of a massive police operation, leaving behind a story of a night filled with deception, fugitives, and secrets that could no longer be hidden. Feeling she had nothing left to lose, the woman switched to her final gambit, playing the self-appointed lawyer card, her tone defiant. "Do you have a warrant?" "I have the right to see it." The officers paused, some raising their eyebrows as if they had just heard a joke. They were all too familiar with this kind of stalling tactic. A tall officer, seemingly the leader, stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We have a digital warrant. By law, we don't need to show it to you immediately." She let out a sarcastic laugh that pierced the night. "A digital warrant? In this tiny town? You must think I'm stupid enough to fall for that nonsense." Her mocking tone only heightened the tension. Some officers were losing patience, while others just sighed, exhausted from the long, stressful night. The commanding officer turned to a younger colleague and instructed, "Check the system right now. Show her the warrant on the tablet if needed." The woman, sensing she had the upper hand, grew even bolder. "Do you want me to call my lawyer? Or should we just argue here till morning?" But she was wrong. The young officer quickly pulled up the warrant on his tablet, holding it up for her to see, the screen glowing with the words, "Valid search warrant, signed by judge." Her smirk faded for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Fine, but you're not going to find anything. I already told you, I don't know any Billy or Seth." The commanding officer shrugged and signaled the others to proceed. Defeated, she desperately tried to block their way, shouting, "You have no right to touch my belongings! This is a violation of my privacy!" One officer, clearly fed up, shouted back, "Ma'am, if you continue to obstruct us, we will handcuff you for interfering with law enforcement." The woman, now frantic, hurled insults at them but eventually retreated as the officers tore through every corner of the house. A team moved into the small, cluttered kitchen, where everything seemed abandoned. But something was off. They noticed an old fridge pushed tight against the wall. When one officer tried to open it, it was stuck as if something was blocking it from the inside. "Is someone in there?" the officer yelled, banging on the door. There was no answer, but they heard faint sounds from within. In a swift motion, they pried the fridge open and found a man curled up inside, his face gaunt and terrified. But once again, it wasn't Seth or Billy. It was yet another stranger. "Who are you?" the officer demanded. The man stuttered, "I'm just a friend of Billy. I don't know anything. I was just hiding here because I was afraid of the police." His statement only added to the chaos. The commander turned back to the woman. "Anything else to say?" "We'll search every inch, and you'll be held accountable for this." She remained silent, her face drained of color, realizing that all her lies had been exposed. There was nothing left to argue. All she could do was stand there, awaiting the inevitable. As the officers were focused on the fridge, another noise came from the backyard shed. Guns drawn, they surrounded the shed, shouting, "Seth, we know you're in there! Come out now, hands up!" After a tense silence, the shed door burst open, and a man bolted out, trying to escape. But he was swiftly tackled to the ground by an officer. This time, it was Seth, the fugitive they had been chasing for so long.
Take them all to the station,
The commander ordered. By the end of that night, the once quiet house had turned into the center of a major bust. Lies, deception, and secrets had all come to light under the harsh glare of police flashlights.